Welcome and welcome. Thank you for joining TheRhyze, a podcast that's featuring compelling conversations with activists, business leaders, authors, artists, and other phenomenal creatives who are committed to creating positive change in the world today as we know it. Our goal here on TheRhyze is to spotlight phenomenal people who are sparking revolution through creativity, as well as the amazing activists who are being the change makers that they are, and doing so because they are interested in creating the change that they wish to see in the world. I am Naje Badu, your host. I am an author, artist, and founder of TheRhyze. So I welcome you to this journey. I have to be honest in saying that you are part of something that TheRhyze is about, considering the fact that this is the first time that I am actually doing a video podcast. I've done many podcasts as it pertains to just the audio, and then speaking to the listenership behind the camera, so to say. So this is the first time that I'm actually putting myself out there in front of the camera. So that's what TheRhyze is about. TheRhyze is about rising above limitations, whether that be our self-imposed limitations, whether that be forms of oppression that are out here through the systems that we navigate through in this society, which we will talk much about that in later episodes. But our goal through TheRhyze is to tell stories of amazing people whose lives are prime examples of what it means to, again, rise above limitation, rise above various forms of oppression, and then above circumstances that are normally designed to keep people or the average person either distracted or disconnected from their dreams and aspirations. So let me back up for a second and give you a little bit of insight as to why TheRhyze, not only just the podcast, but the foundation or the organization that I'm building has come about. Because I don't really want to skate over the word oppression, because it's the seed, right? So I want to back up and give you some insight as to why this has come about. So the organization TheRhyze, which is a membership-driven platform that provides opportunities for artists and activists to work together for one common goal, and that is to take a stance against social injustice and racial injustice and inequality, not just here in America, but around the world. So now that through most of the work that we do at TheRhyze, because we're just being born. We are a baby, but we have big aspirations and big ideas as it relates to how to bridge the gap between artists and activists, and how to use that to not only tell stories, but to create products and projects and things like that empower individuals, but also generate revenue to give back to society in a way that abolishes many of the injustices in it that we are seeing here in today. Again, through most of our work will be centered around the awareness of injustices of women's experiences. I want to make sure that I kind of separate that a little bit, not necessarily because there's an Olympics on oppression of any kind, but to speak to the fact that if we as a society start to delve into the work of the uplift of a woman or women, there is where we will see the intersectionality of healing or the abolition of injustice for class, race, gender, what else? Sexuality, ability, age, culture, and many of those things that we are trying to navigate through our society as it relates to the freedom or the right to freedom and happiness that we all inherited when we were born. So the reason why I think that I have decided to center much of the work around women, and again around women, but essentially the totality of um, rising or fighting or standing against injustice and inequality in the world, much of that stems from a feeling or a seed that was planted when I was a child. So again, I'm going to back up just a little bit and just give you a little bit of about who I am, which you'll learn more as the podcast continues. And then we welcome you to become a member of TheRhyze, TheRhyze.com, which is the RHYZE.com. And much more to tell you about why TheRhyze is spelled that way and what have you. But for now, let me give you a bit of insight about who I am. So as a child, I remember sitting in history class, just really entrenched or really enthralled in the stories told of Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, or many of the leaders that we were told about. Not many, but the ones that we were told about when we were in elementary school, and some essentially in high school. The part that I was solely really interested in, because I didn't like history, I wasn't a math person, I was more into, of course, the arts and, of course, literature. And then if it was history, my interest was really into what occurred during the civil rights movement. And I remember watching those videos and feeling moved, as I'm no different than most people, but stirred in such a way that I felt like, wow, I feel like I've been born in the wrong era, the wrong time, so to say. In the 70s, I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and then thinking that, wow, if I had been born sooner, I would be a teen or a 20-year-old with having the ability to have fought or stood in the ways in which those social civil rights activists did during that time. I remember feeling like, wow, I missed my time. Now, that's the key, right? Because I feel like, wow, I missed my time. So what am I going to do in this life? So I spent a lot of that time. Now, growing up in Pasadena, California, I can't say really that I came across or experienced, I'll say, blatant forms of racism or even just outright disrespect as a result of my color or my skin or what have you. The one thing that I can say, and I don't know if it's because I lived in the western part of the world, but growing up in a melting pot like California, I can't say that I was ignorant to racism, but I just felt like it was a experience that other people had versus me. Living in an affluent neighborhood, so to say, or at least middle class, I'll say. Middle class, I was privileged in ways that I wasn't necessarily aware of, and exposed to things that probably people who were not as privileged or not as exposed to certain types of lifestyles than I was. So I saw all kinds of people. I saw, of course, Vietnamese people, white people, black people, Mexicans, Latinos, Chinese, everyone. I was exposed to all of those people at a very young age. So I'm thinking that racism was kind of done, or if it wasn't done, then it was swept under the rug and soon to be gone, right? And so I felt like, wow, I was born in the wrong era because I had the spirit of resistance inside of me back then, and I didn't know why. And I just knew that I was just into African American arts, African American studies, African American everything, right? Even though it wasn't like I wasn't militant, so to say. I just was very, very interested in our culture. So fast forward, it wasn't really until the 45th president took office that I began to recognize that the racism or the segregation that I thought had been pushed under the rug or was dying actually had never subsided. And that's when I also realized that the civil rights era that I felt I missed had boomeranged, and that we have found ourselves once again fighting for certain freedoms or fighting for the rights that we inherited just by being born. Just the pursuit of happiness, liberty, and then just simply just being, right, without being otherized or othered. I think I've started to study more about the impact racism has had on not just my culture or my people or African American people, but also how it has impacted society and how other cultures have to navigate through certain systems for people of color, period. So there's people of color, and then there's the systems and things like that that were created as a result of keeping people oppressed. Again, there's that word. And again, as I continue to do a whole lot more reading and a whole lot more understanding about my history, about the works of Martin Luther King, Angela Davis, or the Black Panther Party, or even the NAACP, or the Congress of Racial Equality, which is CORE, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and then the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I mean, we actually probably have more up-to-date organizations that are doing the work that they did back then. I'm just trying to bring it all together so that you can understand why I feel so avid about creating TheRhyze, and then also seeing and recognizing that the opportunity to quote unquote fight or quote unquote stand, resist, or be a part of a revolution of some sort has definitely presented itself. I don't want to say again, because like I said, it now is evident that it never subsided. So anyhow, today is a day that I own. The fact that it was about 1.5 years ago that I decided that I would kind of lean into what resistance might look like, because resistance or revolution has negative connotation to it. In past, we've heard about it in terms of an uprising or violence or fighting, but there's other ways to fight that I'm learning, and there's other ways to be involved with a movement that creates social change, and that is in organizing, that is being a part of other organizations or creating your own organization and things like that. So tying it all together is, over the years since I was a child, I've studied everything from African American culture to feminism to so many things, including spirituality. So not only did I have a tiny revolution inside of me, but I also had an inner monk dwelling inside of me also. So in pursuit of learning more about who I am and, my African American history and who I am as a woman and those types of things, part of that also constituted that I learned more about who I am on the inside, which means I delved into spirituality, which is why, if you know me, I have a tendency to be very tranquil, very calm. I can be very passionate about certain things too, but at the foundation of who I am is a calm and peaceful and compassionate and all about healing kind of individual. So one of the things that I realized today, now that what appears to be a boomerang of civil rights, so to say, is that I'm not made to be out in the front lines going rah 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 or fighting and yelling and screaming and protesting, and all of that is wonderful. We need that, right? But I realized that I'm not made that way. And for a while, I felt bad about it. For a while, I thought that that was a negative thing until recently I decided to take ownership of my life and the talents that God has given me to really figure out what my contribution was as it relates to me as a woman, uh, me as an African American woman, and as a writer and an author. How can I merge those two things and make a contribution towards a healing or a change that will benefit society overall? And there, I am an artist, and I am also an author, which you will learn more about as the weeks go by. So I've made a commitment to utilize my voice via the podcast, my art expression through the art that I create, as well as the projects that I produce, and then the books that I write, or the content or the articles that I write. I've committed to writing about things that either contribute to justice and equality or shed light and bring awareness to injustice and inequality so that they can be exposed and hopefully at some point abolished, right? So I'll go back to the word oppression. This is a word that has, I would say probably haunted me, but also too compelled me over the years. It's a word that I have heard when we've seen radical expression of resistance or revolution throughout history, especially as it relates to the abolition of inequality, injustice, and the unfair incarceration of people of color and women. The term oppression has rang very loudly in my ears since I was about 8 years old, because now that I have a better understanding of what it really means, it's not necessarily just about unfair treatment. It's about systems and institutions that are really, really designed to keep certain people from advancing, certain people from having power, so to say, or certain people from having freedom or even economic advancement in this world. So I'm more committed now than ever to, again, use my voice, my art, and my writing to help bring about change and healing that I desire to see and experience in the world. But I want to say this, and you'll learn more about how and why and what I intend to do. Most of it will be around this podcast and the organization and the events and the projects and the products that we build through TheRhyze. There's one thing that I know that I've had an epiphany about as the manifestation of TheRhyze has continued to unfold. And at the beginning of stages of trying to figure out what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, I had an epiphany, and I'll delve deeper into what came of it at a later podcast. But one of the things is what I was experiencing or witnessing on the outside of me was a reflection, somewhat, not entirely, of what I possibly was in responsible for on the inside of me. And what I mean by that is I could create this organization and I could make some wonderful achievements and create some wonderful projects and generate lots of revenue to help support the uplift of women. But who would I be if I didn't recognize that I too have forms of expression that I either are self-imposed or that I inadvertently subscribe to, consciously or subconsciously. So I had to start discovering where in my life that I was oppressing myself and not letting my full self come to existence, right? Or come to the surface. And so I had to really look at where in my life was I being fully authentic. And I still have a lot of work to do. I'm not perfect. I haven't arrived, so to say. But it just really got me to thinking, if I want to do this work, even though it might look different from people who are pounding the pavement, people who are carrying their megaphones, or people who are, getting arrested. Like, all of that is so awesome, in terms of standing for people. But my commitment to activism is going to look differently. And in choosing to express that form of activism, I have to also be active about overcoming and rising above certain limitations that I have within my own life. So, with that said, I want to speak to a lot of issues, a lot of things that we as women kind of encounter as it relates to being free and finding ourselves and being empowered, and without having to hide certain aspects of ourselves just to be accepted, or even subscribing to, some of the ideas that have been impressed upon us, by society, about what we can and cannot do, or what we are allowed to do or not do. So through the commitment, to be self-empowered, right, to rise within our own selves, to find the courage to uncover the hidden aspects of ourselves that we have kind of kept hidden, so that we don't get judged, or we don't get ousted, or so that we avoid loneliness. And there's so many reasons why we quiet, the most compelling parts of ourselves. And so, in doing the work to uncover those parts of ourselves, which is what TheRhyze will inspire other people to do also, is the greatest form of activism. And I came to that awareness that, how can I be an activist through my art and projects and writing and things like that, if I am not first an activist for myself, right? So I am inviting, listeners, members, supporters, donors, all of you who will be a big part of how this vision unfolds. I invite each of you to kind of take that journey also, to go deep inside. I mean, not just do the external work, but also do the internal work about finding the parts of yourselves that have been hidden away for so long, and to really explore how much more powerful of a human being, or how much more humanity you could contribute to just by simply unlocking those aspects of yourself. And so we have an opportunity to change the narrative of what someone else has said was possible for us, right? We can actually begin to conceive of a life or a world that is more peaceful and loving and uplifting, if we do the work to create that in our own lives. We have the opportunity to expand the story of what it means to be a person of color, a woman, someone who is queer, disabled, or even socioeconomically disadvantaged. And that being said, I'm in pursuit of actually freeing myself from my own internal prison, so that I can show up to the fight as a whole and healed person. Now, again, this life is a journey. There's always going to be things to discover about who I am, but making the commitment, and expressing that commitment outwardly, I hope will inspire other people to do the same. So again, TheRhyze is an invitation for activists, artists, and authors, and then also subject matter leaders in areas of business empowerment, prison abolition, social, racial, and gender equality. I invite you all to join me in the journey, and in doing so, I will use TheRhyze as the podcast to provide many insightful tips on how to rise above certain limitations and to live life more abundantly, collectively or individually, in your community, in the world. So I will be covering stories that will enlighten listeners as to what it means to make a creative as well as an empowering contribution to the change we all wish to see in this society. And so I thank you in advance for joining me. Hold on tight. Thank you for staying on this segment with me. I just wanted to explain a few reasons as to why I started TheRhyze. Hey there, it's Naje. Stay right there. We'll be right back with more of this amazing conversation in just a moment. But before we do, I want to remind you to join the TheRhyze Collaboration Network. It's an awesome collective we are building for people interested in collaborating on projects that promote social change in the world. We welcome anyone who is an author, artist, or any other phenomenal creative type to join together with activists, business or organization leaders, and entrepreneurs who have great ideas. If you are someone who wants to stay in connection with like-minded individuals seeking positive change in the world, then come on and join us. As a collective, we will have important conversations, exciting events, create amazing projects such as positive apparel line, anthologies, illustrated children's books, journals, documentaries, and other inspirational content. So come on, what are you waiting for? If you are a creative person or an activist whose works are focused on encouraging everyone to spark revolution within their own lives, then I encourage you to stop by TheRhyze.com and select membership benefits to learn more about how you can join this amazing collective. Trust me, you'll be glad you did.